On behalf of the Department of Literatures and English here at UWI Mona, I welcome you to Conversations with Olive Sr. Right? Of course, my name is Alexis Samuels, and I have the pleasure of guiding you through this momentous event. We are very delighted to host this gathering that brings together literature, art, and community. So again, thank you for joining us. Give yourselves a round of applause for that. All right, but to begin in the right spirit, we will first open our program with a special blessing from Kasike Nebronriks Kaiman, the Yukayeke Yamai Guani Kasike, which translates to the chief of the Jamaican hummingbird Taino people. Please give them a warm welcome.
Usano no da yukuno nibon rish kaimandire kasike yukaike yame wani daka akia kasike rahuto tanamareto akia kasike yani Ronalda ikonye wakia yaka wamun waperitano akia waelino. What I said in Island Arawakan is greetings my relatives, my name is Nibon Rish Kaiman or Kalan. I'm chief of the Jamaican hummingbird Taino people. With me is our daughter Tanama Areto and chieftainess of our community, Ronalda Pearman. We're going to start with a call to the ancestors. In our tradition, whenever there's a gathering, this is one of the ways that we seek permission from those who are here before and honor them in a good way. So I invite you all to join with us. So we will start with facing the east, and I will speak in Wahiani, Island Arawakan, and then in English translate. So for those who are comfortable doing so, I invite you to stand and can face the east along with me. Wariko, wariko, waria, iguana boinya, busikati wa kiritima ako, warawawia chinchilinia. From the winds of the east, we call upon the medicine that comes from the path of the rising sun. We give thanks for opportunities with each new day to do things renewed. This direction grants us vision and is embodied in the medicine of the warawau, the red-tailed hawk, and the chinchilin, or klinkling, or blackbirds, and hankatu, and so it is. Turn to the right, facing the south. Wariko, wariko. Waria. Wabonito. Busikati wa kiritima buhuyem. Auraya, mahaya. From the winds of the south, we call upon the medicine from our great spirit of waters. The medicine that is of healing. The medicine embodied in the totems of our aura, or turkey vulture, which cleanses our lands, and maha, the serpent, which teaches us to shed our past the way the serpent sheds its skin. We call upon healing from the direction of the south, and hankatu, and so it is. We turn to the right, facing the west. Wariko, wariko, waria, soraya, koebe, makitari, wayaba, busikati wa kiritima, okamatina, Buyiria, Mukaroya. From the winds of the west, we call upon the medicine that comes from where ancestors rest, that comes from where the sun rests, the direction of the west. From this direction, we call upon the medicine of Okamatina. Okama in Wahiani, Island Arawakan, is to listen. And from listening, we receive understanding, which is Okamatina. So we call upon understanding from this direction, which helps us to navigate the dark paths in our lives, the dark moments, the moments of uncertainty. And it teaches us that it is through listening to those who've gone before us that we'll be able to navigate these paths, embodying the medicine of the owl, embodying the medicine of the bat, and hankatu, and so it is. Turn to the right, facing the north. Wariko, wariko, waria. Kasiba hagwa, busikatiwa kiritima, eitahu, eitani, yaboaya, wania. From the winds of the north, we call upon the medicine that comes from those who are here before, our elders, our teachers, our ancestors, our medicine people, our leaders. Those who have left this guidance, wisdom for us to move into the future and nurture other generations. We call upon the medicine embodied in the wani, the hummingbird, which teaches us to sip the sweet nectar of life. The medicine of the yaboa, the night heron, which teaches us adaptability. From this direction we receive wisdom and hankatu, and so it is. Facing the center, inviting those who can to touch the earth. Wariko, wariko, itiba kahubaba, apito suimako mona wakar atabera. Mother Earth, we give thanks to you for an opportunity to connect. You who nurture us, you who carry us, we give thanks and hankatu. Now, hands to the sky. Wariko, wariko, yukahu bagwa monokoti, yaya wature, hahom munikonye, hahom mun nonu, hahom mun wayukunu wataino, hahom mun eitahu eitani. Creator, one known by many names, for some the male spirit of fertility. You who dwell in the heavens, the celestial, we give thanks for an opportunity to gather together, to share, to learn, to love. And hankatu, and so it is. And finally, your hands over your heart. I give thanks to you all for the medicine that walks with you, for the ancestors that guided you to this place, for your sharing and presence is medicine as well. And hankatu, and so it is. Hahom, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kasike, for such a profound blessing, right? So, of course, I must say welcome again. I speak for myself, and I dare say I speak for all of you when I say what a privilege it is to be here and to center our upcoming discussions around Olive Senior's latest work, Paradise Once. Olive Senior is the award-winning author of 20 books of fiction, non-fiction poetry, as well as children's literature. She was the Poet Laureate of Jamaica from 2021 to 2024, and has received numerous awards and honors, including the honorary doctorate from the University of the West Indies, Jamaica, as well as the York University in Canada, the Gold Medal of the Institute of Jamaica, and Canada's Matt Cohen Awards for Lifetime Achievement. And we cannot forget about the OCM Bocas Prize for Caribbean Literature, as well as her works being widely translated and taught across schools within and outside of the Caribbean diaspora. So quite a remarkable career here. And tonight, we find that reminiscent of the former persona in her earliest work of poetry, Talking of Trees, Senior grips her tool, her new novel, and says, "This is." And so we make history here, this convergence of story and artistry, as we honor one of the most enduring voices within Caribbean diaspora literature. And carrying this sentiment forward, I now invite Dr. Lisa Tomlinson, Head of the Department of Literatures in English, to deliver the opening remarks.
Can I get some help here with which one? I don't want to touch anything. Okay, I'm prone to accidents. My family call me bath hand, so I don't want to touch anything. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you all to this special occasion, the launch of Paradise Once by Olive Sr. Today we come together not only to celebrate new literary work, but also to honor Senior's dedication, creativity, intellectual effort that brings stories, ideas, and voices to life. I'd like to extend warm greetings to our distinguished guests, Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Education, Dr. Dion Edward Keir, and Professor Mervyn Morris. Please also join me in giving a warm welcome to Olive Sr., our special guest this evening. We are truly honored to have you with us. And to our faculty, staff, students, and virtual audience, welcome. At the Department of Literatures and English, we believe in the transformative power of words. Books are more than text. They are carriers of culture, memory, and imagination. In Paradise Once, Olive Sr. masterfully embodies the role of a cultural carrier to illuminate the richness and complexity of Caribbean identity. As a character in her short story collection, The Pain Tree, implies, there's a difference between those who inherit the land and the ones who already possessed the earth. This distinction lies at the heart of Senior's storytelling. Her new novel take up this charge with power and sensitivity, preserving and reimagining the memory of the Taino people and affirming the true belonging rests not in succession alone, but in ancestral connection and lived continuity. We are especially excited about this launch as it coincides with our West Indian literature culture, our West Indian literature course, which is taught by our very own Dr. Alexis Samuels, where Olive Sr. this year is our featured special author. This alignment provides our literary and creative students, and indeed all aspiring writers, the invaluable opportunity to meet and engage with her in person. What better way to bridge the generational gap by allowing students to encounter the writer behind the words that have shaped their studies? The department would like to extend our deepest congratulations to Olive Sr. for this remarkable achievement. Come on, With Paradise Once, Senior extends her literary style with its refusal of excess, displaying an eco-poetic and ethnographic attentiveness. Considering the state of the world in which some would prefer to revise history than recollect it, this novel is timely and necessary, embodying her characteristics, blend of restraint and revelation. It is quietly insistent, historically grounded, and deeply humane, a testament to Senior's exceptional contribution as a writer and cultural custodian. To our guests, students, faculty, and friends of literature, thank you for joining us this evening. Your presence here today highlights the importance of nurturing and celebrating literary voices. It is now my great honor to invite you all to engage with Paradise Once, to reflect, to discuss, and to celebrate the joy of reading. Once again, welcome and thank you for being a part of this memorable event.
All right, thank you, Dr. Tomlinson, right? True words, really speaking to how Olive Sr. herself has this ability to unearth these buried histories, right? But of course, we know tonight that literature often does not stand alone, right? It requires some kind of visual representation alongside it. And with that, we invite our featured artist, Aloha Lukman Amataya, who will now share their reflections.
Good evening, everyone. Permit me to stand on the existing protocol. My name is Alao Lukman Omotayo. I'm from Nigeria. It is an honor to share with you the journey behind my work, a journey rooted in heritage, resistance, and enduring power of art. And my artistic path begins with metals, a material that is both unforgiving and eternal. Much like history, it helped me to honor metal hold memory. In my body of work, I bring together imageries from tiny people of the Caribbean and the Yoruba tradition of West Africa, the two powerful ancestral lines whose visual languages continue to resonate deeply across the world. As a cultural diplomat for over 8 years in Jamaica, a researcher and diasporic artist, I find echoes of shared memories and resistance in both cultures. The Taino Zemi, the spiritual figure once carved in stone, speak to an indigenous cosmology rooted in earth and spirit. The Yoruba Orisha, with their intricate symbols and sacred stories, carry centuries of resilience, divine order, and cultural wisdom. Through my art, I aim to bridge this visual world, connecting them in sculptural form that speak to survival, identity, and continuity of spirit across the ocean. In my metal work, you will see reimagined ancestral altar, ritual posts, and deities, where Yoruba and Taino iconography merge through traditional techniques like chasing and repose. These methods, once used to craft sacred forms, now become tools of remembrance and education. My intention is to give permanence to symbols and histories that were too often erased, destroyed, and forcefully forgotten. But let me be clear, this fusion is not a collage. It is a conversation that asks, what happened when drums beats of West Africa meet with carved stones of the Caribbean? In that meeting, a new language is formed, one forged in metal, steeped in memory, and alive with ancestral energy. Now, let me turn to my textile. As a pioneer of Jadire cotton industry in Jamaica, I extend this conversation into cloths. In my textile series, I made tradition Adire resist technique, deeply rooted in Yoruba heritage, with ancient Taino motif honoring the intertwined African and indigenous roots of Jamaica. This fluid indigo pattern, rich in tones and texture, become canvas for reimagined zemis and spiritual symbols. Motifs once etched in stones now revived through cloths. And by embedding this sacred form into fabric, I reclaim narrative that were silenced and evoke the presence of ancestral who still speak through the symbols and story. This work reflects Jamaican layers heritage, where African memories meets indigenous spirits. Through this fusion, Jadire becomes more than a fabric. It becomes a living archive of identity, resilience, and artistic reclamation. In both metal and textile, my mission is the same: to preserve the past, amplify the present, and inspire the future through form that endure, to resist, and remember. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Real reminder of art and textile in and of itself has that ability to link us beyond generations, beyond borders, right? And right now, speaking of which, we have to think about Caribbean literature itself, right? Resting in the hands of not only the present generation, but promising students, the young generation who carry the conversation forward. And for that reason, I now invite to the platform Gianna Mackenzie to add her voice to tonight's narrative, followed by Jeanette Campbell, another capable student. So please give it up for them.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'll be reading one of Olive Senior's poems, Pull of Birds. Son and grandson of weavers, rejected that calling but did not neglect craft, keeping 2 sets of books. On his first voyage, landfall receding, where was Japan? He sailed on, praying for a miracle to center him in that unmarked immensity, as warp to woof. And suddenly, from the north, a density of birds flying south, their autumn migration intersecting his westward passage. At such an auspicious conjunction, his charts he threw out, the flocks drew him south across the blue fabric of the Atlantic, weary mariners buoyed by the miracle of land soon, of birds flying across the moon. Birds seeking to outdistance 3 raptors skimming the surface of the sea and sending skyward their doomsday utterance of hawks' bells, tinkling endlessly. Birds speeding to make landfall at Guanahan. Thank you.
Yes, hello everybody. I'm always a student. I'm always learning. I'm going to be reading a little bit from Paradise Once. I'm reading from a section that tells us something about Night Orchid, a character that my spirit just took to immediately. Can you hear me all right? Okay. Tilt the mic a little. Down. Is this better? This is fine? All right. Look, I need to talk to you about something. Corncob paused and adjusted his headband, buying time, then looked back at the workshop where a shadowy night orchid could be seen in the gloom of the hut. He nodded in her direction. Shark Tooth, he's made a marriage offer. Go away, for Night Orchid? Are you crazy? Corncob signaled Burning Spear to calm down, wishing he would go back to polishing his spear point, as that always kept him on an even keel. He wet his lips, finding it hard to talk, so there were long pauses between his words. It's a very handsome offer. The thing is, you know I'd like to keep her here in the workshop, to keep the family line going. We are renowned by now. She'll take over one day. It won't be easy to find her a husband who will want to move here. You know our women go to join their husband's family. Burning Spear was still shaking his head. Shark Tooth, that monster, why? Did you tell him where to put his so-called offer? You'd want that mongrel in your family? Quite apart from anything else, we don't know the first thing about him. He tells so many lies we can't even be sure of his bloodlines. What is he? Have you found that out? The cacique has approved it, Corncob said quietly, so there's nothing I can do. Yes, he has certainly wormed his way into Ron Swiftly's ear. Besides, he's not exactly poor. Burning Spear looked at his skin with something like horror. So you would sell your niece to that witch, that imposter, that Corncob looked miserable. Come now, that's harsh. You know how it is. My sister's children are of our blood. So as their eldest uncle, I am in charge of bringing them up, finding them mates, just as my wife's eldest brother is in charge of bringing up ours. I have a responsibility to make the best match I can for Night Orchid, all Pebbles' children. You know, Bright Star is already spoken for and will be moving to her husband's village. Night Orchid is special, you might say. Finding her a husband won't be easy. Have you told Pebble? Not yet. That's why I'm sharing this with you, cousin. I need your help with that. You know what my sister is like. Burning Spear laughed and held up his hands. No, not me. I am not going anywhere near Pebble with this, nor Mockingbird. You know they feel as I do about that man. Anyway, why now? She hasn't even seen her first blood. Sure, it will be 2 or 3 years before she can marry, but we will be looking for offers at the first solstice ceremony after she has seen her first blood, which might be soon. But I don't know why now. Burning Spear took up his tool and resumed buffing his point as Corncob ruminated. Why Night Orchid? I don't know what the attraction is. Our skills have given prestige to the family over the years. We are Owl Clan, yes, but we are not amongst the highest rank. Everything we create in the workshop belongs to the cacique anyway, and we are grateful for whatever he returns to us. Corncob turned to look at the workshop where his niece could barely be seen. Look at Night Orchid, a skinny little thing, sweet and hard-working, but shy. No womanly airs about her. Not yet anyway. There are other far more attractive girls in the village closer to marriage age. I've really been turning this thing over and over in my head. But I can't go against it if it's our chief's wish. I tried to talk to Ron Swiftly, but he refused to discuss it. But Night Orchid with that Anki, every day since he arrived, I've asked those who fawn over him, what is his pedigree? What are his bloodlines? Where does he come from? No one knows. Corncob, you cannot let it happen. With that, Burning Spear stood and put his tools in their leather bag. His smile on arrival replaced by an angry scowl. I'd rather commit murder than let that man have his way. Corncob stayed seated and opened his palms in supplication. What can I do? Burning Spear started to walk away, but turned back. Only one man can help you. Have you talked to Candlewood? Not yet. I'll ask Ibehiki to consult his emis on this matter. No one can go against whatever the gods decide, not even the chief. Corncob smiled as he rose and went up to Burning Spear and put his hands on his shoulders. Thank you, cousin. As ever, your mind is as sharp as your points.
Thank you for those readings, allowing us to understand more than ever how important it is to grab a copy of Olive Senior's Paradise once right there while they last tonight. They're going out really, really quickly. All right, so now before we move on to other segments of the program, we invite a representative from the library, Audrey Sandler, to receive a copy of Paradise once, a gesture of sharing this work with the wider UE community. Let us now take a moment to relax and be swayed by sound. So once more we invite the Cacique and his family to come forward and provide a musical performance for us.
Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3.
All right. Good. Hold on, Mama. Come to this side. Mabrika. Mabrika means greetings. The song that we will perform is all about Mother Earth. It's giving thanks for all the occasions that she has given us to celebrate. As the reading was done by Miss or Mrs. Miss Campbell, showcased not only the vibe and the atmosphere of times gone by shared by Miss Olive Senior. It shows that we don't move forward without connecting with our ancestors and our semis. And so this song is in celebration of celebration, the things that we love to celebrate, given to us by Mother Earth. Ready, Mama? Wait, not yet. You want to see her? It's the mic, it's the mic. The mic can move. All right, come here now. All right, I think it's, there we go.
Bomatum.
Yeah, good job. Nice.
Bomatum. Atabe. Musika. Awetu. Bomatum. Atabe. Musika. Awetu.
Well, a truly memorable performance right there, right? One more time, please give it up for the Kasikean family. All right, now it is the moment we have all been waiting for, all right? The moment we've been anticipating, and that is the conversation with Olive Senior herself, moderated by Professor Opal Palmer Adisa. Let's go. Yeah, you may have you take a seat right here.
Well, actually, no, we could use one mic because I'm going to be asking a question and she's going to be responding. So that it's. Or put it that way so that it's not so intrusive. So we can't use that? It goes to the camera. Okay, there we go. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, we're on. So Lisa, you're going to make sure that I keep within the time frame. I have a whole lot of questions, and Olive knows that we've been trying to do this interview for years, but it's not that today. We're going to focus on the text. So are we ready? Yes? All right. So I'm going to start off with one general question. You have described yourself variously as a writer of poetry, fiction, nonfiction, as well as someone whose writing is deeply rooted in cultural research, oral tradition, and historical scholarship. Can you tell us how these different impulses, the creative, the scholarly, and the cultural, come together for you in your life and work?
Well, thank you. I don't really think of them as different. I sort of live what I consider a seamless life, where everything I do feeds. Sorry. It's not on.
It is on.
Oh, it's on. So okay. Start all over. Okay, can you hear me? Is that working, the mic? I grew up in rural Jamaica. I have a very loud voice.
Yeah, you do. You do. Go ahead. No, with the mic. Go ahead.
Well, I'm not sure how to hold
Maybe a
it.
little closer to your mouth. Maybe a little closer.
Okay, is that better? This is very distracting, actually. I've forgotten the question.
But
Okay. That's a very long question. Okay.
well, do you want me to rephrase it?
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, the question was about how I'm interested in a lot of different things, which manifest themselves in different ways, and how do I do that? But I don't really, I just do it. In other words, I just see myself as taken in the world every day, and then a lot of that taken in comes out in different ways in writing. You know, I don't sort of have any philosophy of writing or anything like that. I just do it. And therefore, the life I live, and I've always lived since childhood, which is one of intense curiosity of the world around me. I read a lot, but I'm also taken in the world. That is what shapes me as a human being, and also shapes my writing, which just comes out in different ways. You know, something arrives as a poem or a short story. I don't sit and think, okay, what is this going to be? The thing arrives, and I do what needs to be done. So, yeah, I'm not able to give a very intellectual answer about that kind of question, because it's just, to me, it's how I live my life. It's what I do, and I don't see any difference between the life I live and my writing. My writing is my life, you know? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we just wanted to see, in terms of scholarly work and the kind of research you've done, how that process is. But as you're saying, it's part of the lived reality, and so there's not a specific way in which you go about doing that kind of a book.
Well, if it's a book that's if it's a nonfiction book, and it's, you know, I've done several, the encyclopedia, a book on Panama, a book on Caribbean women, and so on. Those are research based, and those are very specific to a topic, and clearly my head is in a different space. It's into that research space. But my other work is, you know, I'm always researching, let's put it that way. Even for my poetry, you'd be shocked at how much research goes into most of the poems I write, as a way of enabling me to have a holistic view, but also giving me a vocabulary, you know? So, yeah.
All right. Well, you said let's focus on this new work, and I certainly want to focus on Paradise One. And so the first question is, reading Paradise One, I understand it's an historical novel set in 1513 in Cuba, and centered on the indigenous Taino people, a massacre survivors' spiritual mission. What inspired you to return to early colonial history for this work, and what drew you specifically to the Taino and the period?
Okay, I wasn't thinking of it in early colonial history, which it is, but really I have, since childhood, been interested in these people that we were told Columbus met, these simple, primitive little people sitting in little huts making pots, and then they all vanished. And that really embedded itself in my consciousness, even since childhood. And so, in a way, I've been researching this book ever since to discover who are these people. And it's shocking to me to discover who they were and who they still are is so different from what we have been taught about our history, you know, this part of our history. And so, in a way, I had to write this book at some point, you know what I mean? Because it is just another way of confronting the historical lies we've been told.
Yeah. And how did you go about researching the Taino worldview, the myths and the religion. I was particularly interested in that. And even the culture and the language. There's a glossary at the back of all of the Taino words that you've used. So what was the research process?
Yeah, well, I didn't set out to write a novel. I set out, as I do, to satisfy myself, to learn as much as I could. And since the quincentennial, when was it, 1992, right? The quincentennial of Columbus's arrival sort of set in motion a whole body of research and a resurgence of interest in our indigenous ancestors. And there's an enormous amount of work out there, research, most of it done in the Spanish-speaking islands, because of course there's much more of a continuity in those islands. Our continuity ended, or there was, in 1655 when the British came, there was that kind of truncation in terms of our language, what interested us, and so on. So there's an enormous amount of research out there, which I have pursued over many decades, really just because I was interested. I've written a lot of poems using the mythology that Taino mythology and so on. And so the book, writing a novel was the last thing. This wasn't part of the plan. But then I ended up with a lot of research, and I said, what am I going to do with this? And I thought, well, a novel would be the only way of using up what I had learned about, not just Italian, I'm interested in the indigenous people of Central and South America in general. Mm-hmm. But also, I felt that I wanted to write a book that would enable us to reconsider how we look at history and the way we think history in Jamaica either began in 1494 when Columbus came, or 1655 and with the plantation system. This is how we have been taught to look at our history. And I feel that we really need to start rethinking where we're coming from, who we are, and who are our indigenous ancestors, who are very much alive. In the Spanish-speaking countries where they've done extensive DNA, I think it's over 60% of the population has Taino through the mother's side, which makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. And in Jamaica, I don't know, there's been some research here, probably less, but I'm saying, first of all, the Taino didn't die off, as we were told. And every time you eat bami, you are taking part in a Taino ritual or an indigenous ritual that goes back beyond the Taino to, I think, Central America, where yuca and cassava is not just the main food to be eaten, but also part of the spiritual food. Yuca or cassava is sacred, almost in a way. It's what keeps us alive. It's from Mother Earth and so on. So I've been inspired by all of this and really rethinking how we view history and maybe how we should be thinking about it in different ways. And so I wanted to pay tribute to these ancestors that have been largely written out of our history.
Yeah, thank you for that, because as you say, so many lies we've been told and taught, and I remember also being told that these people were died out or decimated. And I don't remember when Peter Abrams' View from Kubaya came, and that was the first time I read that there was a connection between African and the indigenous people, and I thought, wow, it really forced me to rethink this whole history that we've done. But the question I want, and you started to talk a little bit about it, has to do with there's a lot about the worldview, the myth, the religion, of the Taino, so their cosmology, their sacred bundles, the semis, and it plays an important role. And that for me is really important because, African cosmology in some ways, not in some ways, in many ways have been maligned. So how do you negotiate the line between historical fidelity and imaginative reconstruction? What is the poetic or novelistic license necessary to do that?
Yeah, well, I hope I haven't taken too much license. I have tried very hard to be true. I've tried to tell the story from the perspective of the Taino, and therefore that embodies their worldview, which is, it's a world where there's no separation between nature and human, the living and the dead, and so on, which is similar in some ways to African and
sacred and
also
secular
traditional cultures. So a lot of what takes place in the novel, obviously it's an imaginative recreation, but I tried as much as possible to be true to the information I had learned from what scholars themselves were saying, and where we didn't know much about the Taino, because they didn't leave a lot of themselves behind, other than what is found in the middens and their bones and their artifacts, carvings, and so on. So what I did, if I wanted to speak specifically about something, and I couldn't find any of that in what had been written about the Taino, I looked at the nearest indigenous group that they might have been connected with, because it is believed that they came from Central America, the region around the Orinoco, that region, and there are living indigenous people there today. So in some cases, I then looked at what the practices were, or the buildings, or, to try to be as specific as possible. So I really tried to be as accurate as possible. But it is a novel, and I use this is where a novelist has it over the historian, because the historian has to be absolutely true to what they discover. Whereas I can take that and I can create characters and incidents to give life to that historical information, which is what I hope I've done in the novel. So it's a combination of both, but I tried very hard not to move too far beyond what I had learned or what we know about this culture.
And what is it that we should know, based on the research that you've done and what you've presented in the text about the cosmology and the belief system of the Taino people?
Well, it's sort of represented in the text. I mean, the thing is, when Europeans arrived, the first thing they wanted to do, because they arrived as good Christians, it was religion and the hunt for gold together that drove this enterprise. We know this. And they had writing. And therefore, if you did not have writing, you were uncivilized, you were beyond the pale. They had to have a debate in Spain as to whether the native people were humans or not. People don't realize this. And so Columbus sent a priest to live with a Taino chief to discover if they had religion, because that was the most important thing. And he wrote down, of course, he didn't speak the language, or let's say on both sides there was some difficulty, but he did write down their mythology, which a Cuban scholar in recent times has sort of put together and translated and so on. It's now available. So we do know that they had religion. They had a higher god who was like God, high above us all, and then they had a pantheon of spirits that were like, say, the Yoruba, where each spirit was a semi who represented a particular,
aspect of nature.
Aspect, yes, like agriculture or
the ocean, the river.
Yeah, the mother, the the Great Mother is Atabar and so on and so on. I'm embarrassed to be talking in front like this, in front of Taino. And if I get it wrong, feel free to think. So they have a pantheon of spirits. They have a high god. Well, we're calling him a high god, and so on and so forth. So they did have religion in that sense. And they had really, to my mind, a very sophisticated society in the Caribbean. Because if you think about it, the people who arrived, the Taino occupied the Greater Antilles, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Santo Domingo, Jamaica, etc., Bahamas. And these islands were, as Columbus said, the earthly paradise. There was plenty, in terms of food. And that is the most important thing in building a civilization. They had, land. The land was plentiful, the seas were plentiful, the rivers. They had an abundance of food. So over thousands of years, they were enabled, and they lived in peace because there were no wild animals to attack them. They had no real enemies. We were told the Carib came occasionally, but they were not, they were able to live a peaceful life over many, many centuries. They had plenty. There was no food scarcity. Occasionally there was a hurricane, and because they understood nature, they knew what to do. They knew a hurricane was coming. So over time, they were able to develop on these islands an extremely sophisticated society, which I try to describe in the book. It was ordered, they had leadership, there was an elite, and others who, they had rules, regulations for proper conduct, and so on. And historians have said that had Columbus not arrived, the Taino culture would have been on the same level as the Maya and the grand cultures of South America. They were on their way to becoming that in terms of their belief systems and their social life, which was highly organized. And where every citizen, my understanding, had a place, had a role, and understood where they fit into this. And they had, each island was different, in the same way as Jamaicans and Trinidadians and Barbadians are different. But we're still cousins, we understand each other. And people were trading and making marriage alliances, moving back and forth, because they were great canoeists. And so it was much easier to get around in those days than it is today. You know what I mean?
We need some of those canoes.
Yeah, so, this is my impression and my interpretation, but it is based on the latest research that, I'm amazed at what archaeologists can find in some bones, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's there.
Yeah. When we learn the history of the Caribbean, somehow pushed in the back is the issue of genocide and the horrific enslavement process that happened. And certainly in this novel, you deal with the encounter, the Spanish encounter, genocide and resistance, survival. These are all things that we are familiar with in terms of our national heroes. And it's important, this book is important coming out at this time because there are a lot of different information that had been withheld or that had been presented in one way that is now being retold with much more accuracy. And so I was wondering, this book particularly for high school students, but in general, what do you hope readers, especially in the Caribbean and in the diaspora, will take away from this story? And the message to me feels urgent, but I don't know. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, well, first of all, a greater understanding of this culture, but also indigenous people all over the world today are seeking their rights. It's the moment for indigenous people. In Canada, indigenous people have really taken possession of who they are and are sort of forcing renegotiation at every level, whether legally, politically, and so on, and are making a major contribution now to arts and culture and so on. Australia, it's happening.
Yeah.
And I'm a little distressed that the people who bore the brunt of the impact of that encounter are left out of this discourse. And so in a way, I'd like my book to awaken that kind of interest among other indigenous peoples, and an awareness of the fact that the Taino were the first people in that encounter, and they didn't long survive it, because my book is set 2 generations after Columbus came, and the Taino were so decimated that they then had to begin as early as that to import enslaved people from Africa to replace them. It was that swift, that encounter. And what really pains me is that after just total destruction and just needless cruelty, shortly after the time in my novel, they discovered the riches of Central and South America. And therefore, these islands became backwaters. They were destroyed for nothing, really, because they didn't have that much gold, which, they provided cassava and wood for shipbuilding and so on. But they were then more or less neglected because the conquerors moved on to a much more lucrative part of the world. So it need not have happened, if you know what I mean. That is the part that pains me, that it was for nothing, this total destruction of a culture and a people. I mean, some people survived, and I wanted to write a book that that leads us to the present. And so the earliest Maroons were both the Taino who survived and took to the mountains,
With the Africans.
along with the earliest Africans who came in the 16th century, who also took to the mountains and united. So, this is a start of Maroon culture. So I wanted to end my book on a positive note, although it starts off with a massacre, an actual event in a village where a total village was massacred, and my novel is about 4 survivors.
Yeah.
But I'd like to think that it gives us hope that out of this darkness, there are always people who are seeking light, and that, this is what we should take away from just what's happening in the world today, everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I think it does give us hope, and certainly one of the things you do, which is important, that continuity, and that, you give us sekou, I don't want to give the book away for those who haven't read it, so that you give us the thread that Africans came and they bonded, they're part of the survival, and that's how the Maroon started. So that's a perspective of history, certainly in the Anglophone Caribbean, that we seldom get. As I said, the first inclination I had of that was in Peter Abrams' View of Kobaya. So you give us that, and I think that's important, because I do think our young people and all of us need to understand that when we came here, we met others, and we forged and formed a bond with them who taught us the land, who taught us how to make bame and to take out the poison and that kind of stuff. But when I initially saw the title before I read the book, Paradise One suggests a resonance with Paradise Lost, Milton's book. And to what extent did you have Milton in mind, or more broadly the notion of lost paradise? And do you see your novel in dialogue with that?
With Paradise Lost?
Mm-hmm.
Well, not exactly, though. Having been brought up and having an English colonial education, I can't get that Paradise Lost out of my mind. But it really wasn't. What was in my mind is the fact that Columbus did say this was paradise when he came to the Caribbean, And so it just seems to me that, first of all, I wanted to use the word paradise because it's also very it has a lot of resonance today in how our islands are marketed to tourists and so on. So you have to question, then I'm not going to put words into, I'm not going to say anything about this. But if you start thinking about how we're still selling paradise, but is it paradise anymore? You know what I mean? So I wanted to use the word paradise, and of course once,
Yeah.
yeah.
As you say, it's part of our colonial education, so certainly Milton's Paradise Lost was in
Lost,
there.
yeah.
But I also was thinking about Toni Morrison's Paradise, which comes to mind here in your title. And so did Morrison's work or her treatment of the idea of paradise, lost community, influence you either directly or indirectly?
No, not really. To be honest, I really wasn't thinking of that.
Okay. All right. I'm going to do one more question, and then we're going to open it up for those who I'm sure have a lot of questions for Olive, maybe not directly for this book, but around her work in general. What are the challenges of writing, and maybe challenge is not the right word, but the challenges of writing dialogue, speech, and language, worldview of a people whose voice are rarely preserved in written form? And so we have the dialogue in the book, can you just give us a sense of how you went about reconstructing those dialogue, especially in the last section of the book, which is really about the four survivors being, in a sense, given a guide about how to continue?
Yeah, well, to me, if I'm writing fiction and I create characters, they arrive with their voices and their dialogue. In all my books, I've done this. I don't even have to think about it. If I know the character, I know how the character is going to speak, Because that's how we are as human beings. We arrive with our voices, we arrive with our dialect, with our, whatever. So once I knew these characters very well. I've lived with them for a long time. I feel as if they're alive. And therefore, I just enable them to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really think too much about it. I do use some tiny words in it simply because I wanted to keep the reader conscious at all times that we were in that world,
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't trying anything special. I was just enabling these people to talk in the way I hope they would have been speaking to each other, at that moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
And I really tried, in editing and going back, I really tried to cut out anything that seemed too modern, or, but there's from time to time I use a cliche expression or something, because they would have had their own cliche expressions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what they are. So I didn't really find that too challenging, but you know what? It's up to you, the readers, to tell me what you think, how it comes across to you, and whether it feels real, which is all I want, that it should feel genuine and authentic and not contrived and so on.
Yeah. And my final question, which is a really raw, is that, the survivor, and in a sense, the bringer or the continuity of the culture is a young female who, in fact, I don't think she has gotten her, yes, she did. The destruction, the genocide was simultaneous with her first blood. And so, again, I just, wanted, in terms of how were you positioning, that was a kind of matrilineal society, but how are you positioning young women and young girls as being the carrier? She carried the sacred object, and then she is part of the four that is going to be leading this new transformation and dealing with the encounter.
Well, one of the things that struck me was the role of women who had a major role to play. These are not, as far as I can tell, second-class characters. And the four characters that evolved just came out of they just arrived with themselves. And I sort of like the character of the girl because, as in mythology, she's born with a deficiency. You know, she has, what do you call it? She has fits. What is the technical term? Right. Epilepsy. And she's cured. So that's quite often the hero in any mythology is born with something that makes them not imperfect, not perfect. And so she is born with this, in a way, a handicap, but she's cured, and in a way she is invested spiritually, I think, as part of that process of being cured. And I sort of like this character. She evolved because she's a busy little girl, you know what I mean? She's a carver, which is unusual to be a woman, but she has a great deal of inherent wisdom. And at the end of the book, the four characters are given new names as part of the process. And I was trying to find all these names, and it turned out that I gave her a name which I think exists in history.
Yes.
As, you know, there is already someone with that name that she was given. So in a way, I like that kind of intuitive continuity, if you want to call it that. But I want, all the characters are different and represent different aspects of the things I wanted to talk about. I wanted to link the indigenous people of the Caribbean with the first arrivals of indigenous people in the Americas. So that is done. And I wanted to link them to, well, of course, the mythology and the belief systems and so on, but also to the new world that's emerging, which includes Europeans and Africans. So in a way, there's a way in which I wanted to sort of generate these kinds of linkages of that world and that that means they're living with us up to today, and it's going as far as possible back in time to the earliest people who came to the Americas. So I sort of wanted that circularity because that is part of the worldview as well.
Well, you certainly opened it up for us, and they serve as the new navigators into, how does one rebuild oneself after genocide, and you have to flee, and what is it you take with you, and what is it you forget? And so the novel certainly does that.
And I think it's relevant in terms of what's happening to people all over the world today as refugees, as survivors of disasters, and so on. I mean, in my head, there's that kind of resonance, although this is a story from the 16th century.
Thank you. I want to thank you for the book. I certainly need to read it again, but I'm very grateful. I think I want to say that I'm very grateful for this story and for this connection and for giving us an opportunity to deconstruct the lies and to see another truth and another reality, and for us to accept the different cosmologies that exist in the world and to understand how European invasion has changed our willingness to look at and accept other cosmology, and particularly the cosmology of the peoples whose land we now occupy. So I want to thank you for that. And so now it's open to all of you. If you have a question for Olive, if you've read the book or you have not yet read the book, but you have questions. Do we have another mic to run, or are we going to be using one of these? Yeah, my rule is really done.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. My question to Ms. Senior is about possibly did you have a particular audience in mind? Because Dr. Opal, you suggested, you think maybe young people. And I have read the book, and it just magically took me into that world. And, you know, I'm a teacher too, and I was wondering, you know, that struck me like, who would I teach this to? As a history teacher, I'm immediately wanting to like, oh yeah, I want to teach students history through this. And then I thought to myself, I'm not so sure if I see it for young people. You know, I still having that conversation in my head about, do I think it's really for young people? I'm not sure. So I wondered if you had a particular audience in mind.
Well, I never write for a particular audience. You know, I've learned, like, even with my poetry books, it never occurred to me that they'd be taught in schools and that children would enjoy them. You know, and you put the work out there, and it's out there for whoever. I mean, the thing about this book, though, is that the leading characters are all very young. The girl is just 11, 12. The oldest one is 18. There are 4 young people in that age group. And therefore, one would think that the book would be interesting to people in that age group. But I would love for students to read it and so on, but I have no control over that. I think the Minister of Education did get a copy at Calabash.
Thank you.
All right, but yeah, I'm coming. Okay, go ahead.
Olive, one question is, you just mentioned that when you knew the character, you know how they would speak. How did you determine their motivations?
Well, I mean, to me, all of these things go together. The motivation of the 4 characters at the start is just survival. It's just to flee. But they are, in fact, being controlled by higher powers. You know, they're being herded towards a destination and a destiny. And their motivation is always survival, if you're in that situation. But at the same time, I'd like to think that they change over time, they mature over time because they're interacting with each other and are thinking about, what is happening to them and so on. But I don't think of motivation separate. To me, it's part of who the characters are and part of the development of the story. The story has a certain impetus going forward. And people meet people and things happen. So, I don't think of it as something, I don't sit there thinking, what is the motivation, in other words. It's implicit in the action and in the behavior of the characters. So there's an evil guy in the book that it's some people's favorite character. And his motivation is different. He is the opposite to the good shaman. He's sold his soul to underground powers. So his motivation really relates to the individual and the enhancement of his individual powers, acquiring wealth, fame, and so on, as opposed to the motivation of the other, which would be to take care of society. So it varies in that way.
Okay, you have a question. All right. I might have to cut in first because we have a question online from a student, Danielle, who would like to know, what will your main advice be to an undergrad student of literature who wants to be a writer but is not decided on what kind of literature to specialize in the future?
What kind of what? Specialize?
Yeah, what kind of literature to specialize in the future? So apparently perhaps prose or, poetry. But yeah, genre, they're not quite sure.
If you're interested in writing and literature, I would say read everything. You don't start off specializing. You start off acquiring knowledge as much as possible, then a specialization will occur to you out of that vast body of knowledge you've acquired. I'm not a teacher, so I'm not the best person to ask these questions.
Yes. Apart from the fact that you said that you have been that you have been researching the Taino, Arawak, Mayan, etc. people for a long time. Apart from that fact, how long did it take you to write this particular work?
I hope I wouldn't be asked that question. Okay, I started writing it quite a while ago. And the thing is, there's an author's note at the back which says is that I made many, many attempts to write this story, and in fact, I wanted to set it in Jamaica, in a maroon community. Because I'm saying, why am I setting this in Cuba? And I made many, many, many attempts over time to write this story. I just couldn't do it, couldn't get it done. But anyway, about a while ago, about 8 years ago, I did write a draft that is set in Cuba and has the characters that are in this story. I wasn't happy with it, and I put it aside. And I did not realize I had put it aside for 6 years. And Johnny Temple, who is my publisher, saw me at Calabash, not this year, the year before, and said, boy, I'd love to publish something of yours. What do you have? And I said, oh, the only thing I have is this novel, but it's really awful. And I'm just stuck with it and blah, blah, blah. And he said, oh, I'd love to look at it. So I said, only on the condition that you're honest with me and tell me whether it's worth doing, etc. And he came back right away and said he loved it. And what I really liked is that he identified exactly what I had identified as, the problematic. But he said, no, I'd love to publish it. And that gave me the impetus to sit and rewrite it and do what I needed to do. And so between that and now, I just sat there and got it done very, very quickly because somebody was interested, and I guess that's what I needed. But the point is, I've been living with it and with the characters, I would say, for decades. And because in all my attempts to write, the characters that are in this book, apart from Saku the African, are the same characters that kept recurring in my consciousness. And I kept trying to place them here, there, and do different things with them, and they did not want to do any of these things. And in my author's note, I point out that I kept going back. It had to start with the massacre, because in all my reading, the description of the massacre in this village by Las Casas stuck in my memory, in my mind, to a point where the only way I could get rid of it was to write about it, because he talks about the slaughter. It was like cattle, the blood running like cattle being slaughtered. It is so dramatic. And I just had to start in that village. And so, so there's a way in which you can do all the research and do all the reading, but there are maybe higher powers speaking, within you, forcing you to do what you have to do. So, yeah. So this version of it didn't take me very long, but it's based on many, many, many attempts to write it. Yeah.
Which also answers my query as to whether you are writing this and writing other things at the same time.
Yeah.
So your answer, you seem to have answered that.
Well, this is unusual because normally I am doing several things at a time. I find if I'm writing fiction, I'm also doing poetry. But in the case of this book, I was busy. I was also poet laureate. So I concentrated on this book alone. I have done no other creative work, simply because I didn't have the time. But normally I would be doing everything at the same time. Yeah. Sure, whatever.
Thank you. I just wanted to know, in your opinion, what are maybe three novels by Caribbean and Jamaican writers that you think everyone studying Jamaican or Caribbean diaspora literature should
No,
read?
don't ask me that.
Or just some of your favorites?
I'm going to get into trouble because I know all of these people. I'm not answering this question. Furthermore, my brain is such right now, I can't even think of a single novel.
Or something that you were reading while you wrote this that you felt was kind of in conversation with it?
My brain is kind of... No, I mean, I'm not trying to evade. I am trying to evade. That's preventing me now from thinking of even one title. I'm sorry. If I think...
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm curious about how you think maybe your own spirituality and conception of the world was influenced through writing and doing the research, especially in the context of how, from my understanding of indigenous worldviews, where both humans and nature are inseparable and where conceptions of time may be different. So how in doing research on that and in writing and kind of living in this world while you're working on it, how that might have impacted your perspectives on reality, especially when the colonial and post-colonial education systems teaches us, and the English language teaches us a worldview that is so different from indigenous worldviews.
Well, my worldview isn't too far from the Taino, to be honest, in the sense of I have a very close connection to nature. But also, I live a kind of seamless life in the sense that time matters if I have an appointment or I have to do things. But normally, I don't have that sort of Western consciousness of time and all the things we're supposed to be conscious of. Partly because I grew up in rural Jamaica, where my consciousness was shaped by living in a very isolated place for the first, my first few years. And therefore I lived in nature. I mean, that is still embedded in my consciousness. And also I just grew up to a different rhythm, and so it's very hard for me to fit into a lot of the requirements of modern life because, it's hard, yeah. But I try, So in other words, I didn't feel uncomfortable writing about that world or writing about the connections people make with ancestral spirits or with other spirits or so on. It's not part of my own belief system, but it's something I'm conscious of and I respect, So I didn't have a problem with that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for how you have invested your life in giving us such a broad and wonderful perspective on life and informing and inspiring us. Thank you so much. And I wonder, from that relatively long perspective, many decades, what your thoughts are about the present moment in which we find ourselves. I hope that's not too personal a question, but I just want to know, what do you think of where we are now in relation to where you've seen us come from? Thank you.
Well, in relation to where we are now, I'm happy that I'm old, to be honest. No, really, because it's so sad in every way, compared to the life I have lived, which is not necessarily a privileged life in certain terms, but yeah, I've been privileged to have been born and lived in Jamaica and lived at different levels and traveled and done all of these things and found a great deal of joy in the world, made friends, and, in a world that was relatively peaceful. And to wake up every morning and see the world that people have to live in and children and what's happening now, it's sad. And I'm really sad for the young people coming up in, into this world. And what you all going to make of it? In other words, I grew up in a world, even in Jamaica, where we never locked our doors at night. Even Jamaica, as an example of how it was such a peaceful place up to a certain point in time. And that enabled us to develop in a particular kind of way. And I really, I try hard not to really think about what's happening.
Could I ask one question here? And it's really, has the cacique been able to read your book yet? And may I ask what your reaction was to it?
Thanks for that question. I'm too afraid to ask it.
I believe it was well written. It touched on a lot of things that is very poignant in the resurgence now, and I see that she really did do a lot of research, and the ancestors wanted this work to come through her. I found it interesting that it was set in Cuba, and when I was asked to come here and do the blessings, I said to some of the community, who in Cuba has read the book? And I saw that she got approval from Jose Barrero and some others from Cuba as well, the Taino community there. And as I read and was getting more involved, it was very emotional, because a lot of what was done with the paper genocide of our people, Paradise once writes us back into history. The concept of please. The concept of where, for us in our community in Jamaica, that they started to erase us, is this narrative that when the British came in 1655, that the Spanish released the enslaved. And for some reason, people forgot that there were Taino people here that were enslaved. And from that point forward, that narrative continued. And you've given me an opportunity to thank her again, because it's the second time in this space that there has been a book published, and the book launch is in this space, and it started with an ancestral blessing. The other was Boyanani's A Taino Girl's First Adventure by Leslie Gale Atkinson Swaby. So, I appreciate the ancestors, working through you. So thank you again.
Thank you. Good evening, Olive. Thank you for evoking paradise. I'm a bit of an optimist, so I don't think it is completely lost. But there are just two questions I wanted to ask. When I was at school, we didn't know about the Tainos. We knew about the Arawaks, and then there was a change, and we heard that Arawak was a language. And I wanted to know if the Tainos in general, wherever they lived in the islands, spoke the same language, had a similar religion, if that was so, and there was some sort of unity in terms of their culture.
Yeah, it is believed the people of the Greater Antilles were very similar. We call them Taino. We don't know what they call themselves. It is said that they said Taino means we're the good people, which is what I think every indigenous group in the world says. That's how their names come about.
Yes.
We are the good people. So they're very similar. We don't really know, the details, but they traded. There was a lot of inter-island contact because it was by sea. They were similar.
Yes.
Each island probably had its own distinct culture, but overall there was a common belief system, cultures, and so on.
Okay, the second question is around the religious issue, because you said that the priests basically studied the people to find out if they had a religion, and that this would make a difference in seeing them as human. I just must comment on this, because many years ago when I lived and studied in Spain, I went to the Cathedral in Seville, where I was told that Columbus had taken two Tainos, they called them Arawaks then, as specimens to show the king and queen. And of course, their narrative was that these people had gone very excited because they wanted to see the great king and queen of Spain. But the question around this is, having studied them and having found out that they had a religion, did that make a difference in them seeing them as human beings? Or was their God a lesser God and a defeated God? So, you know, how did it really pan out?
Humans, if they were converted to Catholicism, that is what made them human.
Okay.
And in fact, it wasn't just two people taken to Spain. Many Taino were taken to Spain. And there's a novel called Taino by Jose Barrero, which purports to be the diary of one of these men who went to Spain with Columbus and then made his way back. And it's very interesting.
Yes.
Yes. Perspective, you know.
Well, the last thing I want to say, Olive, it's a comment, because I think in this novel you have given voice to these people, and it is a history that shows that we didn't start with defeat and enslavement, that there was a civilization that existed. And that's not just for the Tainos, it's for those of us of African ancestry, Indian ancestry, and all of us who came in a way as indentured or enslaved. We had a history before the history that was written. So thank you for that.
Okay, yeah, good evening again. My question based on what is your view, or what are your view during your research about Taino? The reason why I'm asking this question is that when I was making my research on Taino images, that is Zenith, and started creating most of those images you're seeing up there. And I have some of the Jamaican who, most of them, don't let me generalize, maybe the young folks, or I should call it the Gen Zs. They look at those images of like, oh, these are idols. And they call it idols, and they say, oh, these are for Obia, and then it's not good. And I was like, what do you mean that it is not good, that Obia is not good? What do you mean by Obia? And also, some of the drawings I do, again, or some of the motifs are put on the fabrics. Some of them, again, will ask at, oh, if I don't know the meaning, or if I don't see any this thing on it, that I'm not going to wait. So during your research, do you have any experience of such?
Sorry, of what?
Of such, maybe people asking that, why are you making research on the title images? Oh, these are Obia, that they are not good.
Yeah, but, well, I mean, I think throughout civilization, you know, one set of people will always, who think a certain way, will always see the other as, you know, outsiders, heretics, whatever. And so, I mean, I'm not surprised that people think that some of your imagery is, you know, whatever, because it just depends on what your spiritual background is and what you're taught and what you have imbibed in your own religious beliefs. And so you will look at somebody else's representation and call it something else. But I mean, I don't know that this is just isolated in relation to us. You know, I just think it's part of the human experience, that we denigrate the things that do not satisfy our own belief system. I'm trying to be very careful here. But, you know, and I'm sure you found this in Africa as well.
Yes.
You know, yeah, so.
You know.
But I'm not surprised, though, that you get this reaction to your work.
Yeah, you know, actually, in Africa, we sell the new religions at the beginning of the brainwash of the Africans.
Yes, yeah. Well, a lot of that goes on, but yeah. And anyway, I want to thank you for your work and also ask people to have a look at that absolute metal work that is so extraordinary by Mr. And of course the fabrics as well. So thank you very much for agreeing to show your work here.
I think it's time for us to give Olive Senior a really warm thank you. And I really want to encourage you to purchase the book. And I think this would be ideal to teach for our high school students, quite frankly. I think they need it because they don't get that kind of perspective. And it would begin to open them up to look at different realities and to search their own history, which we don't do very well in Jamaica. So Olive, thank you so much for this.
No, well, I just wanted to thank the cacique and his family for honoring us, blessing us. And it is just wonderful to have this living tradition in front of us, to know that these people know, despite what the history book tells us, are very much alive. So thank you so much for, I'm very honored.
I just wanted to add to what was shared by Professor Opal, that not just high school, you can start as young as kindergarten, 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds, but you read it to them as stories. And so the older they get, they will ask questions. That is what we do when we do presentations at schools and different locations, and our own daughter is homeschooled. And so this is how we live the life. And she's learning it and she's asking the questions. Regarding what you shared, it's not just Gen Zs. We have our own practice at home. So we greet the sun. We talk with our ancestors and we will blow our wamo, the shell, the conch shell. And I've had neighbors, even in the yard, saying, "What is that? It's Obedama work." So it's not just Gen Zs. You know, there is a direct cut between our parents teaching us about the culture and us finding it out by ourselves. Sometimes the connection is cut by even our grandparents, rightly so, because they have experienced the tragedy that was coming from their parents and maybe didn't want to pass that on to their own children. So we don't get what the rightful culture is supposed to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Truly a lot to think about with that conversation. A reminder really of how we sometimes have to overlook certain colonial narratives in understanding our Caribbean realities and ourselves as well. So a truly enlightening session this has been. And of course, in that regard, we must provide gifts as a token of our gratitude towards Olive Senior as well.
And I have to thank the Department of Literature and English for arranging this wonderful. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, thank you. All right. So I call Dr. Lisa Tomlinson forward to present a gift to Olive Senior. Alrighty, everyone. And with that, sadly, our program has come to a close, but our conversations will always flow forward, much like our history, right? And so with that, I invite Dr. Tomlinson once again to step forward and give the final vote of thanks.
Okay, I'll be very quick because we're going to have beverages and food. And I'm sure we're hungry, right? We did hear about the Bambi. So I wanted to just, all right, just to very quickly give a vote of thanks to, and this is not in any particular order, so don't feel less important. I'm just reading from a list. So I wanted to thank the dean and faculty for their support of the Department of Literatures in English. And of course, I want to also thank Jeanette Campbell. Jeanette, please stand up. Yes, yes. Jeanette's role was not just a reader. In fact, Jeanette was very instrumental in working with the department and reaching out to the department and giving us this opportunity to host the launch. And she played admin, reader. She was even not the cook, but other things that made this night possible. And I also want to thank Kazik and his family for the opening and also for the entertainment. Thank you very much. And of course, I want to thank Antoinette Jackson and Whitney Eaton. Antoinette is she here? She doesn't like to be seen, but I'm going to show her up tonight. She was also very instrumental in working with Jeanette. She did a lot of organizing in terms of the catering, and Antoinette is the admin staff, but she went beyond that. And also Whitney Eaton is she's our lecturer in the department, and she also went beyond that. She did the graphics, so the beautiful flyer, the putting together the program, and so much more. So I want to thank them for that as well. The department staff. I also want to thank Gianna McKenzie. I don't see her here. Are you still here, Gianna? Okay, she had to leave. The student reader. And just to say that Gianna is our poet laureate because she had won the Poetry Slam or Clash earlier this year. So thank you, Gianna, for reading. It's very important that we involve our youngsters or young people in events such as this. And I want to also thank Aloho, Lumand Moteo for your art, for allowing us to feature your art alongside the literary work of Olive Sr. I want to thank MITS, which is our technical, I wouldn't say assistant because they did more than assist because we couldn't do all of this technical gadget things. So I want to thank you very much. And I want to thank the Department of Literatures in English student ambassadors. We have student ambassadors here in so many different capacities. The photographer, the usher. They're trying to hide, but again, they have been very, very helpful coming out tonight. And of course, I want to thank, most importantly, I want to thank you, Olive Sr., for allowing us, giving us this opportunity, our first event. That was a bang, right? Yes, we started off with a bang. Thank you so much. And Opal, Professor Opal, moderator and poet, who did a wonderful job moderating the session. And I want to thank you, the people who came out this evening. You could have been doing anything else on the Thursday, right? You could have been doing anything. And I want to thank I didn't forget them, our virtual audience. Hey, turn around and say hi, virtual audience. Where do we say hi to them, right? All right. And have a great night. Enjoy the food. It should be good. And beverages. And hopefully you'll keep in touch with us. We'll be having more launches, film screening, and just lit is lit, all right? Take care.